What's a country's biggest asset? You may think of natural resources or location, and yes, they're both important. But you need people to utilize those assets. You need human resources. Without that, your economy will not take off. It's a challenge that many countries are facing. Those in the West have aging populations. They don't have young working-age people. Some states in Asia face the same challenge. Tonight, we are focusing on two of them. France and China both face the same problem, that of a shrinking population, but their reasons and solutions are different. Let's look at France first. The country logged 678,000 births last year. That's 7% down compared to 2022 and 20% down compared to 2020. This is a demographic crisis. This is the lowest French birth rate since the Second World War. At this rate, the population will shrink. So what is President Emmanuel Macron doing? He's reforming parental leave. Right now, parents have two sets of leaves. One is the basic maternity leave. The second is an additional leave for 1 year, but it doesn't really pay well. Just a shade over $435 per month in France. Plus, it cuts women off the job market. 1 year of maternity leave. So Macron is proposing radical changes. He wants both parents to be able to spend 6 months with the child, and that too with better pay.
After the extension of paternity leave, I strongly believe that the introduction of a new childbirth leave will be a useful element in such a strategy. Childbirth leave will replace current parental leave. Firstly, it will be better paid. It will allow both parents to be with their child for 6 months if they so wish.
But will it be enough? You see, leaves were not the only issue. Until now, France was doing well demographically. It was the odd one out in Western Europe. The likes of Germany and Italy struggled, but France did not. So what has changed? Let me tell you what a recent poll found. 30% French couples blamed the economy and climate change. 28% said raising children was too costly. So it's not a cultural change. It's not like couples do not want children. In fact, 66% of French people who do not have children want one eventually, 66%. 20% parents would like one more child. So people do want children. But circumstances are preventing them. Things like higher inflation and fears of climate change. At the same time, deaths are falling. We know how good healthcare is nowadays, so most people live longer. In fact, France's death rate dropped 6.5% last year. It's pretty organic though. The state is not stopping people from having children. Neither is it forcing people to have more. Which brings us to China, the other end of the spectrum. China's population has shrunk again. By how much? Around 2 million. The year before that, 2022, also saw a drop. It was the first time China's population shrank in 60 years. Why is it happening? Well, one reason is economic growth. As countries industrialize, their birth rates plummet. It's happened everywhere. But China's turnaround has been quick. Unnaturally quick. And why is that? Because it was unnatural. In the 1980s, China implemented the one-child policy. Couples could have only one child. If they had more, they would be fined or punished. As a result, the birth rate dropped. It was around 17 per thousand people in the 1980s. It has now dropped to 6.4. So Beijing is worried. In 2015, they removed the one-child policy. In 2021, they allowed couples to have 3 children. But rules are not the problem now. China's economy is losing momentum. The job market is not what it used to be. Last year, youth unemployment was 21%, meaning 1 in 5 Chinese youth had no jobs. So raising a family is risky. Many Chinese say they don't even have the money to get married.
It's very expensive for us to get married, especially in a big city like Shanghai. For example, if we get married, we need a place to settle down. And having a house is definitely an essential. Very few people, perhaps very few women, would be willing to rent a house with a man, then get married. So in terms of financial ability, it actually puts a lot of pressure on young people, including myself.
That's the problem. Beijing has announced some incentives to boost births, like subsidies and payments, but clearly they've not worked. Either the benefits are not enough, or they have not been implemented on the ground. After all, China had other concerns in 2023. Their local governments were running out of money. So maybe child subsidies never really took off. Whatever the reason, it's a huge problem for Beijing, because by 2035, they will have 400 million retirees. Old people who do not work, 400 million of them. A, someone has to support them, and B, there is added pressure on healthcare systems. It's bad news for a developing country, worse for a wannabe superpower. China needs young people to feed its war machine. If not, the PLA cannot compete globally, especially not with the US. America's population is still growing. It's expected to peak only by 2080, the US population. So what can the likes of France and China do? Well, Paris has a good chance to course correct. It is an open society, also one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. But China may struggle. They rank 72nd in per capita GDP. France is at 25, so it's easier for France than it is for China. And it's a lesson in demographic policy making. You can force people to have fewer kids, but you can't force them to have more.